let me first and foremost say the reason I am here is him. I was hired here in April of 1999 when they were in that building. Caitlin said, you know, we're here. I said, I actually lived on this very street right there for a while until moving. And it was, for me, it was a very, very much an interesting time. First time I started teaching, and I actually believe in what Dr. Partner Bill has always said, teaching the next generation. I actually believed in it. That's what I'm still doing, not just non-proliferation, but military affairs as a whole. So I always am thankful for that opportunity, and more importantly than what he did here, actually he gave me a raise, and I left. I left for other reasons, personal, and 9/11
That's why I don't give raises anymore. So.
and 9/11 happened. For me, it was, as Bill mentioned, my origin. I wasn't born in Afghanistan. I was born actually in Czechoslovakia, in Prague. But being of Afghan heritage, sitting here in this beautiful place, I thought I need to go out and do something different, because the two countries that I'm from here. I fought in the Marine Corps. I'm a former Marine, and Afghanistan is my country of heritage. For me to just sit here, not, you know, we did a lot of media coverage and all that. To just do that may not be enough. Also personal reasons, so I left. But what Bill and also his wife did afterwards, to me is invaluable. I mean, as I said, I lived here on my terms. After he was actually very generous. The current job I have, I reached out to him. I said, Bill, would you write a letter of recommendation? And I still have that letter. I actually, I said, you know what? I was hesitant, but I'm very grateful for that. First time I'm saying this publicly, that is friendship beyond collegiality, which we are. A lot of people see you the next day, you're not there, they need you, they don't need you, they don't even remember who you are. He is not that man, and for that I'm very respectful, and that's why I said, hey, I'm coming, I'm volunteering to come and talk here since I am here at the Naval Postgraduate School. That I want to put on record. What I say now is a disclaimer. I work for the Defense Department of the United States of America. That's my boss. What I say here is my own views. I cannot talk about Iranian nuclear policy without discussing United States foreign policy. So please give me that leverage, and then we can have an open discussion. I'm not going to say, well, I can't talk about this, I can't talk about that. Then why are we here? We are here on an educational platform rather than a policy platform. So if you give me that respect, I will respect your questions as an education platform. I report to a general, so that's my job. I work with the Defense Department. So with that caveat, it is my views and not those of my boss, U.S. Marine Corps, or anybody else. I have been asked to talk about 30 to 40 minutes, which I would do, and then we can discuss the ongoing situation between my country, United States, and the Islamic Republic, or as Dr. Potter said, if you want to venture off, I don't know anything about most of the world. I know a little bit. I'm a student of Middle East. That's all I am, and I'm not saying this. I have never. Ever will. I have a PhD in Middle East Studies, mainly from NYU and partially from Princeton, but that doesn't mean anything. I am humbled every morning I wake up, and my job, which actually has direct impact on, for me, the most important thing is American lives. I have to be honest. That's what I work on. I make sure that we are, please come in, that we are successful, that we win, but also we care about making sure that the world as a whole is kept. In a good situation, and then we can discuss those things and we go from there. Let me, before the title is Strategic Patience to Active Resistance: Iran's Nuclear Policy After JCPOA. At least in this forum, I don't have to tell what people JCPOA is. If you want, hi. It is. See, I know the more mature people here. The ones who've been here for a few days. the young Padawans, hello for all of you. If you've been here for a while, I know you. So you all know what JCPOA is, right? The Iran Nuclear Deal Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was signed by the United States, the P5, Germany, EU, and one side, and Iran on the other side. So I'm talking basically after that, but in order to discuss that, I think it may be useful to talk a little bit about not the whole history of why we got there. I'm sure there are some of you have worked on it, have read on it, but where I come from and how to put that into a perspective of what is happening today. The first thing is Iran was cheating before we even got to that. I understand we are all excited about the plan. I'll tell you my own personal views about what it was, and I can share it with some publications. But the reason we got to the whole idea of their discussions is because Iran was reneging on its obligations under the NPT. They were caught. How they were caught, we can discuss that. Part of it we can't, but they were caught and then they came to the table and then started negotiations. That is important to keep. It wasn't like we were talking to a fantastically, situation where country was pursuing this under its normal routes without lying or cheating, and then they decided not to have it, and we got there. They were cheating. They were actively breaching a contract or at least an agreement they had signed. In 2013, I had written a short piece discussing Iran's doctrine of what Iranians called it, heroic flexibility, arguing that Hassan Rouhani's election in August of 2013 should have not been a surprise because the system or nizam, and again, those of you who speak Persian, when I say regime, I'm not meaning this pejoratively. That's what they call it. They don't call it administration. Some people here try to be too politically correct and call it Khamenei's administration. It's not an administration. They've been there for 40 years. It is, in Persian, the word they use is nizam. It's an Arabic word, but in Persian it simply means two things. It either means a system or a regime, that's all. So it's not a pejorative term. I know there's a lot of political correctness that they try, well, why we call them a regime, that's bad. No, that's what they call themselves, a regime. System, whatever you want to call it, nizam. So I'm not trying to say they're bad, they're a regime, they're bad, they have teeth. So the regime itself, or the nizam as they call it, sorry about that. So my argument was that the Rouhani's election should have not been a surprise because the system or regime, nizam of Iran, calculated that the system required a total facelift, both domestically and internationally, in order to safeguard its existence. Now, we can discuss the reasonings for that in the Q&A. I'm not going to go on that, why they were thinking to have a facelift. This is 2013, Rouhani is coming. People say, oh, this is a great surprise. It was not a surprise. And I can say I have written beforehand that he would win because they needed that facelift. If you want, I can send it to you right from here. So they needed to change. Now, the nuclear negotiations were concluded under the doctrine of heroic flexibility. And those of you know of Islamic history, that's invoking a truce initiated by Hassan bin Ali, that's the second Imam within Shia Islam, in 661 AD to avoid bloodshed within Muslim community. Linking his country's flexibility to a wrestling match, Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, cautioned that his country's negotiators that, and this is a quote, a good wrestler at times shows flexibility due to technical reasons, but does not forget his opponent or his main goal, end of quote. So if you look at this whole concept of flexibility that Hassan bin Ali, that's Ali, the son-in-law of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, used in a battle within what became later on Shia Sunni, he talked about that. He said, you show flexibility, but don't forget what your objective is at the end. Now, how this, how the so-called, what we call the technocrats surrounding Rouhani and the hardliners in the ilk of Qasem Soleimani envisioned Iran's main goal and the nature of their country's opponents is key to fuller understanding of Iran's action after JCPOA and US withdrawal. In order to understand what happens, why the whole negotiation is signed, in the post of it, you have to understand, because as Khamenei orders that you have to go talk within this concept of heroic flexibility, there are two understandings. And again, in Iran, there are no political parties per se. You have what we call, for lack of a better word, hardliners or technocrats. Rouhani's folks are what I call technocrats. I'm not the only one in that. And the hardliners, as I said, are the ilk of Qasem Soleimani. How they understood this flexibility, in my view, is the key. It was the key in 2015, it was the key in 2018, it is still the key today. Maybe not after last February, last month, it may have changed and we get to that one. Now, before going to post-May 2018, I want to disclose that, this is my own disclosure, I can tell you without, that I personally did support the JCPOA in my writings. I can tell you I had a little bit of what was going on. I knew a little bit of it, let's put it that way. And I had negotiated with the Iranians for almost 10 years, directly, face to face, with some of the people you see out there. I can't talk about both of those, but that's obvious. The key here is that within that, I personally thought that the agreement as signed had a lot of flaws. It did not look at Iran's policies of why they were doing it. It did not look at Iran's past behavior. It did not look at Iran's two other aspects of the nuclear policy, nuclear program, which was the weaponization and the delivery systems, which basically gave Iran full-fledged, open access to those two, the weaponization aspect and the delivery system, whether they were ballistic missiles or other platform aircraft. But Iran was pursuing mainly the route of ballistic missiles. There was nothing on that. But it bought us time, if you would. And there were other circumstances, not related to Iran per se, but in some other regional countries where their patience was running very, very, very thin. So President Obama at the time understood that Iran is not in an isolation. There are other countries with different security understandings, not just Israel. Israel was very important in that, but it wasn't just Israel. Trust me on that one. I know Israel gets the blame always, but it's not just Israel. There was a consortium of countries that their patience was running thin, and they were breaking points in each one of those 3 or 4 major countries, 3 specifically, that Obama tried to push. Yes, kicking the can down the line, that was the idea. There wasn't more than that. But the idea was, okay, we kick the can down the line 8 to 15 years with a certain aspect of it, but that gives us time to change Iran's behavior. Not ourselves. Obama's main policy was not to interfere, but rather have the Iranians change that. So change of behavior rather than change of regime, if you would. And thus the conclusion was that change of behavior would become such that Iran would not need nuclear weapons or nuclear technology for weaponization to safeguard its regime. If I tell you that almost the same policy is pursued right now, we may think I'm smoking something that you're allowed here and not in Virginia, but I'm not. The policies have not shifted as much. It is how it is pursued, that change of behavior to change of regime. So I was supporting that with that. And I'm on record again in public also writing that I did not personally, as a member of the United States military, I did not support the withdrawal from the agreement, as weak as it was. And here, to paraphrase General Mattis, or Secretary of Defense Mattis, at the time, he said, look, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting, he said, when America gives its word, America should keep its word. I believe in that. Our word, our credibility in the world, whether this man knows about agreements going all the way back to when he was sitting on the Kyrgyz delegation at NPT extension. If your word is not worth anything, the basic premise of American foreign policy, American defense policy, is to build alliances. If the allies think that every day we say something, the next day we have a change of administration, they say, hey, if we don't care about that, then that lack of credibility, in my view, is humongous in how we pursue our overall defensive and foreign policy. So therefore, I was personally not for it. So I just want to put those caveats. I supported the JCPOA with a lot of caveats. I did not personally think that it was right for us to withdraw it. Full disclosure on that aspect. Now, for the hardliners, again, I use that word with quotation, but I'm not going to keep on doing that. I don't like the term for the hardliners, but basically take Qasem Soleimani and his surrounding. In Tehran, US policy on Iran since 1979 was predicated on regime change. They never believed, still do not believe, that the United States, whether it was Obama or Trump, to give you, in some views, two extremes, but believe it or not, they are not the two extremes in that. The extreme was Clinton. When you look at regime change, Clinton actually had more teeth than Trump ever has had. And George Bush, and one part of this, that it changed. But for them, it doesn't matter who it was, Carter all the way to Trump. American foreign policy was always regime change, not change of behavior. Therefore, they believe that in order for us to move forward, we have to keep that in mind and work around there. For Rouhani, the most ideas was either to get some economic vitality. He saw, and he as a group saw, the economic downturn in Iran as the greatest danger. Believe it or not, they saw their own people as the greatest danger because the people were so frustrated. So they thought that this gives them time to bring in economic vitality and also to, in their words, these are actually direct words, to put a wedge between America and its allies, what they call the Americans and the Zionists, i.e. Israel, and Europeans. And they did. And one reason they actually came to the table was for the first time Russia and China did not interfere in the discussion of the United Nations Security Council. They did not vote for it, but voting against it would have killed it. They both stayed away from it. China got a lot of leeways for oil and gas. We can discuss that, but Russia didn't do it either. So what does it mean in Iran itself? Khamenei at this point, what he does is he allows Rouhani to pursue this policy of constructive re-engagement, as they called it, with Europeans, with Russians, with the Chinese, even with the United States. But he gives Iran's, what I call near a broader regional foreign policy, directly to the hands of people like Qasem Soleimani. Indeed, actually, Qasem Soleimani was one of the enforcers. Not the only one, but he was maybe the most important one. And this is key again to understanding. As JCPOA is signed, there is a division of labor. And this is again not some kind of something it is actually happening. And the Iranians are talking about it. That division of labor brings us to what is going on right now. What Qasem Soleimani's hardliners do is they look at Iran and they pursue this policy of what I call offensive defense, or to make sure that you keep the Americans, and by this, they always think of Israel as a potential adversary that could do it without the United States. That's the only country they think that can act against them without the United States. That we keep the Israelis and the Americans and else people further away, the engagements will happen outside of Iranian borders. And initially they used that mainly by proxies, and increasingly they started relying on actual Iranian military assets. The two cases where Iranian military assets became very, very vital was Iraq and Syria, partially due to our problems. Again, full disclosure, from the day I was hired in this job, that's 12 years ago, until today, I have said us invading Iraq in 2003 was the greatest strategic mistake we have made in the Middle East, and I'm still sticking by that. Syria was not really that much our issue, but Iraq, we broke it, we still own it, and we keep on paying for it. But that's a whole different discussion for next time I come here. But then they started using their own troops. So this is where things were going on as Obama leaves office and Mr. Trump comes to power. So the policy, and it's very interesting that Khamenei, even when Trump comes in, he orders the pursuance of our policy of heroic flexibility still. And this is again, I hope some of your students, the next generation, actually look at that. Why Khamenei actually orders it, an open forum, that still do it. So they have these two policies, which I use one in my title. One is called the resistance economy, and the other strategic patience. So if you look at the time of that, this is from May 2018 when President Trump leaves JCPOA to about, I would say, May 2019. So almost a full year after the United States leaves JCPOA, the Iranians don't do much to destroy the regime, the JCPOA regime. Also, when you look at the terms they use, strategic patience and maximum, resistance economy, basically what they're saying is the Americans are putting sanctions on us, we're going to tighten our belts. We're just going to eat it out. And strategic patience, believe it or not, simply means we're going to wait Trump out. If he's a one-term president, we just going to wait him out 4 years. We can eat less, we can have problems, but we wait it out. This continues for until May of 2019. Meanwhile, as I said, they push on this offensive defense, as I call it. One other point I have to make for you, this near abroad policy in Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan is pursued without any direct or indirect influence by the President, Rouhani, or his team. And this is again another key that one has to put in there. So they're pursuing this policy with Hezbollah has always been there, but the new found, even Sunni groups. They tried very much with Hamas. Initially they were successful, later on they weren't, and there are reasons why they were not, we can discuss that. But they were very successful in Syria and also in Iraq. Those are the two. And in Yemen, again, Yemen was not their doing, they just took an opportunity because the Saudis, in all honesty, I'm saying, they just made a mess, so the Iranians took advantage. They're a very good opportunistic, as everybody else should be, they are, and they took it. But there is no coordination with Mr. Zarif, who, by the way, again, this is something I have actually met him more than once. I have had talked with him in the past, not anymore, because this would be unhealthy for my life, but in those days it was not as unhealthy. He would go to the Europeans, and he wasn't lying. The only problem was that he knew about them. That's the only place I think he was not very, he was being disingenuous. But the policies were not even coordinated by the same people. There was no functionality, the doctrinal, strategic between the group that Qasem Soleimani and his group are running in Syria than what he was telling Europeans or even us here and there through, or the Israelis. They were sending messages to the Israelis. The message there did not jive with what was going on the ground. And Khamenei kept these two tracks going simultaneously. In May 2019, there's a change. The change basically is, why is it there? In my view, it's partially because of Iran's miscalculations about their power, partially because, if I may say so, hubris, partially about what I call as Iranian imperial mindset. And for example, I just found that maybe for this one I should have used PowerPoint. A friend, somebody from Iran, sent me a note in a big, huge overpass, not just a flag, but this is written huge. There's a picture of Cyrus the Great, or at least, imagine. And it says, anybody who reads Persian, Iran farda imtidad armani Kurush. Iran of tomorrow, continuation of Kurush's dreams. Well, we know what Kurush did. This is the Achaemenid Empire. It's the largest empire under Persian rule. So that whole idea, and if you see the bottom of it, it is from IRGC. That this idea that Iran is not just limited to Iran today, but it has this expanse of power. Whatever the reason is, my personal view is that the sanctions that Trump brought back, even Trump sanctions are less than Obama, by the way. The president that sanctioned Iran the most in the history of the United States is Barack Obama, not Donald Trump. Right? But And the reason is not because he doesn't want to do it. The reason is he cannot, because there we had an international backing and we could. Right now we don't have the international backing. It's not that Trump doesn't want to do it. Don't get me wrong. It's just he can't. When the Russians are against you in this one, when the Chinese are against you, even Europeans are trying to find loopways, you can't do it. So that's the reason. But it is, Obama was able to do more sanctions than anybody else. So why Iran did that? I'm not 100% convinced on that. Again, I invite any of you, and if you want to write, we would love to publish it. We will pay you. It's this idea why Iran changes from that policy of strategic patience and economy of resistance in May to going what I call it active resistance, which is different. There are some numbers that help us. First of all, inflation rate in 2019 in Iran goes up to 50%. The GDP shrinks by 66% directly of the result. But these are facts on the ground, IMF numbers, not mine. But I think what you have to look at is the effectiveness of, and I should, information operations. Look what's happening in the streets of Iran. Started in 2019, people are calling about referendum, nothing else, referendum. Factory after factory after factory goes on strike. People are openly defying the supreme leader. The supreme leader, that's tantamount to being killed by Iran law, because he is not just the supreme leader of Iran in a temporal way, he represents God, or Mahdi, representative of God. And then this spreads into Iraq and Syria and Lebanon. That makes Iranians very nervous. Where on the day that they are celebrating the capture of our embassy, somebody just happens to hit Iranian consulate in, of all places, in the city of Karbala, the holiest city of the Shia. Stuff happens. That is a way that Iranians just see now their own people in this upheaval as a greatest danger to themselves. So many of these reasons, again, I've said I've not done a scientific research on why this happened. There's a swift shift of action. So what the Iranians do, I can go on through all of them, but the active resistance, the first thing is the tankers being attacked. 2 tankers are attacked, one from the UAE and one from Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf of Oman, right outside of Fujairah, to the UAE port. After that, in July, they hit 6 tankers. But this time, UAE, Saudi, but they also hit a Norwegian and a Japanese tanker. Again, for people here, fascinating is not a single one of these tankers blows up. I'm just giving you a little hint. Look at the weapons that were used. The fact that there were not any casualties or any major blow up, in my view, is more dangerous had there been a casualty or a major explosion. Look at those, because this shows you quite a sophistication. This is not your terrorism in the sense of creating more panic, and they created panic, but it's a controlled panic rather than just let's blow up something and see how big a bang we get and how many people we kill. Again, something to pursue here in places like here, to look at this aspect of how and why. And there are 2 different things. There's some open source material that actually tells you what was used. And they didn't use the same weapon, I can tell you that much I did also. Part of it they're experimenting, part of it is messaging. So, and the messaging against the IO that's coming in from some places into Iran, they're pushing back. Sorry, if I use acronyms, stop me. IO means information operation. So we have 2 aspects, information operation and information warfare. How you operationalize information both in this aspect of affecting a region directly by its own people or directly affecting information in a coercive way. Then they hit one of a US RQ-4, in the street you call it Global Hawk drone, pretty high level. That drone doesn't have defensive measures. The defense is altitude. They hit it with a domestically produced SAM called Sohom Khoradat. Then also what they have done is they would go on uranium enrichment from 3.67, which was JCPOA level, to right now it's about 4.62%, between 4.5 and 4.62. LHU stockpiles, surpassed 370 kilograms with the JCPOA limit. Right now, latest information, sorry, right now it's 370, the limit was 202 kilograms. If you just like to know what it was before JCPOA, it was 10 tons, 10 metric tons. We're still in good shape. Current break time most likely is about a year. Pre-JCPOA is about 3 months. So that's where we, if all the centrifuges work and they're all put, all the cascades that they had, and then they go through. And then they seize a British tanker. When they seize the British tanker, because the Brits seized one of their tankers and right outside of Gibraltar, when they seek the British tanker, they use a disruptive GPS. They use cyber warfare, basically. They lure the tanker into their territory, then they seize it. Unfortunately, what they do there, they keep the tanker for quite a long time, and they also actually take all their gas out. And even after the British released their tanker, which was supposed to not go to Syria, but guess where it ended up in? Yes, the name changed, but it went to Syria. If you want, I can even give you a trajectory. It's open source, I can tell you where it exactly went. At one point it changed its name, and it comes in and parks and gets, and nobody said anything. So, for those of you that looked at appeasement, there's appeasement to the point the British didn't release the tanker. So they get more, in my view, this tendency that if we push, there's a lot of room for us to maneuver. Then what else they do is, in my view, that one that made a lot of people very, very nervous, at least in Washington, is when they attacked the Saudi oil installations. Again, I don't know if anybody's working on that. Fascinating. Good, talk to me. Fascinating. I don't know if you're seeing how they go, the trajectory. There's a lot of open source material that how they come in. And again, the sophistication of, first of all, where they hit, also the trajectory, how it comes in from north and comes back from south. And again, had they blown up these tankers, would have been less worrisome to people than the fact that they did not blow up. Here you're hitting oil tankers which are full, well, not full fully, but there's no explosion. Again, nothing much happens. UAE at the same time actually sends a 2-star admiral to Iran. Clandestinely, but now it's not clandestine because the Iranians put his picture. He's not in uniform, he looks like me, but he was actually. What else they have done? They have resumed enrichment at Fordo. Why is Fordo important? It's very hard to get to it. The North Koreans have built it. It's pretty tough to get conventional weapons to destroy it. That's all I can tell you. Is it impossible? Absolutely not. There are people, humans have to breathe, let's put it that way. There are ways to get to anything. But, and make sure that if they can't breathe, they can't live. But there are other things too. It's not just everybody's, oh, this is going to be a nuclear weapon, Israelis are going to nuke it. No, it's not. That is an option, but that's not where people are going. But it is just not as easy to go hit it. This is not an Iraq, let's put it that way. They also have increased the number of centrifuges from 5,600 IR1, which is the first generation that was allowed. Right now they have installed IR4 and IR5, and we hear that they're hitherto unknown centrifuges are being used. They call it IR8, but whatever. So past the 130 metric tons of heavy water, my view, they're not really pursuing a plutonium-based weapon. This is a bluff, but hey, it's a bluff that is, again, it's not poker that you lose a few dollars. It could be something to think about. There's unconfirmed reports of man-made uranium at sites not reported to the IAEA. And then they attack US K-1 air base near Kirkuk in Iraq on 27 December. I'm always thinking that was an overreach. Once they do that, and then our embassy is hit, an American is killed. If you want to look at decision makings, Trump decides not to attack Iran. I know now everybody talks about it, about everything was ready to go. And Trump said, look, they would have killed 150 Iranians, and because we had a drone and we decided not to. How Iran read that, I don't know. But once the American is killed, we decide to go and take one of theirs. So they kill a contractor, we kill Soleimani. The trajectory of that, I think the Iranians had never, ever, ever thought of. Is Soleimani something that would just happen? No, Israelis had it in their target. We have had it forever. He has a name. Well, he has a name. It's just that that was one thing that we didn't want to go to. That decision is changed automatically. And this, again, for you, those of you who are entering this world, this is where a greatest change is. If you look at Cuban Missile Crisis, the whole crisis, while the crisis was going on, took about 3,000 pages of communication if you put it all together, all the cables and everything. And this goes with 2 tweets, 19 minutes apart. What it does is, it's reality, you know. I'm sure those days, Cuban Missile Crisis, where people were like, oh, what are we gonna do? And we could have had a nuclear warfare with Russia at the time, the Soviet Union. There was no Russia. I mean, Russia was there, the Soviet Union. At the same time, today, this is the reality. It's not just Trump is tweeting, Khamenei is tweeting. Actually, right before Soleimani was hit, right after he hit the Americans, he said America cannot do anything. That was his thing. There is a word of Khameini, his predecessor, saying, Amerika hiç ghalati namitar. Basically, in Persian, it means America cannot do a damn thing. Well, I guess he was wrong on that one at least. But there's a price to pay for all of this. And that's where we are today. The question I have is did Iran say on 5 January that Iran will continue its nuclear enrichment with no restrictions and based on its technical needs? Quote. Have they done that? No. They still are not totally walking out. They have breached aspects of JCPOA, but they have not walked out. When are they walking out? Again, here when people, I'm pointing to him because I know, and there are others who know way more than me on this. The cameras are still on. The inspectors are still there. They're making their life a little teenier harder. I would not even go on if I was a inspector of Iran right now, because the country makes China now look like a safe country. But and that's not, that's also something we have to think about, because while this is very bad for the Iranians, it could also be good for some who want to do certain hanky-punkiness. But their cameras are still on. They haven't really out, and they have not. They can go to 20%, but they haven't. 3.6 to 4.5. Well, yeah, it is reversible, but 20% would be something, as you all know here, I'm preaching to the choir, but that's the thing. So, our policies, United States, we have over 1,000 sanctions on them. I talked about Trump calling off. There's also an understanding in Iran that we are preoccupied with peer power competition. You keep on hearing it. It's China and Russia. We're going to go do this in China, we're going to go do this in Russia. That's the misunderstanding of what we're doing. The Central Command is still very much intact. And trust me, there are people waiting there to Iran to make one wrong mistake. One. And as we saw, when they killed one American, you saw what happened. But this calculation, keeps on going to a place that could reach a point where, because of the fastness, the tweet business, and some of these tweets come in without anybody in the room, our side or their side, that could be miscalculations. And that's my greatest fear. Miscalculation by one side or the other side. That could lead, again, I'm not talking Cuban Missile Crisis, because then you have 2 countries that had thousands of nuclear warheads literally pointing at each other, where right now we don't have that. This is the beauty that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. But it could lead to a major, snafu. So that's one of the things that I would leave you. The second thing, and I'm going to stop right now, is have we lost the momentums in Lebanon and Iraq? Partially, yes, we have. Have we lost the momentum in Iran with this issue of getting the people against the government? We don't do it, but we like it. Yes and no. Right after Soleimani's death, there was some sympathy back to the government, but that was fast lost, mainly because of Ukraine plane downing. But Ukraine plane downing was taken more as a way against the regime, and then what happened afterwards, and the statements coming out, were the harshest against the government ever. Soleimani is a murderer and his leader is an imbecile. This was the champion. Every single place in the country. not a week after Soleimani is monitored. So it didn't look at the elections. I'll bring it to the end here. The elections just happened 21 February, the lowest turning ever in the history of Iran. Their official term is 42%. We know in Tehran it's less than 25%. And the hardliners won almost most of the seats. Now 34 of them have unfortunately gotten COVID-19. But hardliners winning is not a good thing for them because now it's theirs to own, theirs is to fix. They can't blame Rouhani for, okay, you appeased them for this heroic flexibility, it didn't work for us. It's theirs. So confrontation becomes more, in my view, a issue of to work about. And again, we have a spectrum in the Navy. We talk about, competition conflict spectrum. That's what we work basically on. From peaceful presence all the way to total war. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different stages. Right now in Iran, we have crossed all 6 of them. The only thing we don't have is total war. And everybody's looking at China and Russia, and this is not job security. My job is secure. I think we need to look right now more at Iran, maybe North Korea still, although that, who knows? Again, that's not my part. I don't want to talk about it. I think Iran right now is the most potential point of conflict, either with us or the Israelis, or jointly, or the Saudis and the Emiratis. They do not want war. We don't want war. This president, whatever else is there, he doesn't want war. I mean, his tweet after the hitting of the Americans, this is the tweet that he said: "All is well. Missiles launched from Iran at 2 military bases located in Iraq. Assessment of casualties and damages taking place now. So far, so good. Happy New Year." Okay, this is what you're dealing with. The other side is not much more. If you look at what Khamenei said, you can't. As students, we have to think about that. As policymakers and defensive persons, you have to think about that. So, in my view, I'll stop here and you can ask questions. We are in a situation where the nuclear policies, Iran is not going as fast as they want because they can't. Does Iran want nuclear weapons? Absolutely, if they can get it. Right now, they know that if they try to pursue it, it's not going to last long. There are some good measures too. We have 2 senators, pretty hardliners on Iran, and one very close to the president, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Republican, and Robert Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, but the hawk on Iran we hear certain things, I don't know if you heard it, that they're trying to resume the talks, a new JCPOA. Iranians will laugh about it. Right now, they're not laughing so much about it. That's another thing that could be pursued, discussed. This is a place things like that could happen. With that, I stop so we can have a discussion on this issue, or Dr. Potter said a little bit here and there. At your service. Thank you.